a man who didn't believe that you shouldn't kick a fellow when he was down.
To the establishment, the Clermont Set were a group of destructive gamblers. They were tearing up British industry and fueling a dangerous boom in the stock market. The journalist Paul Johnson wrote, "They are squirming social scum, typical of the rottenness that is poisoning British society." But to one group in Britain, they were heroes. These were the growing suburban middle classes who were now investing heavily in the booming stock market, and in turn giving Slater and the others their growing power. To them, Jim Slater was the master of the market.
People like Slater awakened the power of the stock market. He created tremendous excitement, sent share prices roaring, focused attention, national attention on the stock market. It was the story of the day.
How much power did he have personally?
He had immense power in that, with a word, he could move markets up or down. It was quite a frightening power, probably frightening to him too, I would have thought. He had to be very careful about what he said. But he knew that if he bought a share, the share would go up. And that's a pretty good way of printing money.
But Jim Slater was about to stop being a despised outsider. Politicians were going to turn to him for help and make him an influential force in British politics.
There's one basic fact. Labour has a clear majority. We have a Labour government.
In 1964, a Labour government had been elected. They came to power promising to create a modern, prosperous Britain. But almost immediately they were faced with a crisis. The boom that the Tories had begun 5 years before had gone out of control. British industry simply couldn't cope with the demand created by the boom. The new government faced growing inflation and a balance of payments crisis. They had to cancel many of their election promises and cut spending.
I would appeal to people to give the Prime Minister a hearing and not these exhibitionists who follow him from hall to hall.
But our old friends return to the purpose of this meeting. Everything in our program has been costed and is included within the program of our national plan, within our tightly controlled and rigidly expended government expenditure program for the next 5 years. Now, we have some very difficult years ahead of us. I hope no one is going to deny that now.
The fundamental problem, the politicians believed, was productivity. If they could make industry more efficient, the economy would grow and Britain would become rich again. What was needed was a quick way to reorganise industry. At this point, Jim Slater emerged as a public figure. He portrayed himself as a new kind of industrial manager. Unlike the old captains of industry, he was not concerned with the national interest. He was only concerned with making a profit.
You are, in a sense, a new breed of person in British industry, aren't you? Now, you don't deal with any one thing other than money, really. I mean,
that is, in a sense, our product.
How do you mean?
Well, we are concerned with making money. That is what we are trying to do. I regard my prime job, if I can put it that way, as a responsibility to my shareholders to provide for them an increasing return per annum on their capital employed. And this, to my mind, is what it's all about.
What Slater argued was that he was using the stock market as a tool to reshape industry. He sold off any part of a company that didn't make a healthy profit. What remained automatically became more efficient. And he pointed to his phenomenal growth in profits to prove this. What Slater seemed to have invented was a way of increasing productivity without having to invest any money. He was no longer a wrecker of industry, he was its saviour.
And Slater had been seen as a pirate, truth to tell, a trampler of the established order. But of course, by this time, perhaps it was a good idea to trample the established order, make it leaner and fitter, and all the sort of jargon that people put round at such a time. And here also were people who were regarded, and Slater is the classic example, as wizards. They looked like agents of industrial reconstruction. And it's worth reminding ourselves that the government of the time, the Wilson government, a Labour government, had an industrial reorganisation corporation going on at the time, actively backing takeovers, having preferred favourites. It's also worth remembering that the minister in charge was Tony Benn.
The Labour government copied Slater's methods. Under Tony Benn's guidance, they masterminded massive takeovers and mergers in British industry. Old companies were forced together to make new conglomerates. Upper Clyde Shipbuilders was created on Clydeside, and in the process, as with Slater's takeovers, thousands of workers were sacked.
For the people, some people here, some here at this meeting, there will be an opportunity of a transfer. For others, there will not. And to be unemployed is bad enough at any time, but it's a great deal worse, in my opinion, at a time like the present, when people not only feel that in losing their jobs, they are losing their income, but it is, of course, the feeling of hopelessness that comes with it.
It wasn't just shipbuilding. British Leyland was formed by the forced merger of old car companies, and AEI was created out of the electrical industry. In the process, thousands of workers were put on the dole. But journalists and television commentators supported this wave of sackings. They accepted Jim Slater's line. These were necessary casualties in a war to make Britain great again.
Is this just then one of the facts of life of the present situation, that as British industry gears itself up to meet world competition, some of these people have just got to go to the war?
I think that is true. I think it's an analogy, really, of there are a certain number of people in a boat, like 100 people, and the boat's going to sink unless 2 or 3 of them volunteer to jump off the edge.
Like the way you call it, volunteer.
Well, they might be draw lots for it.
I thought he was credible, and I think I bought the Slater story, which was that he had at least the gift to wake up boring companies, of which there always are plenty, and there were plenty then. Now I think that I think we swallowed it whole. I say we. I think a lot of people in my business as financial journalists swallowed it whole. I began to realize that I and other people in the financial press were willing dupes. I'm labouring this. It's a bit on my conscience.
In fact, there was very little evidence that any of the companies that Slater took over had become more productive. Almost all the increase in profits he reported came from the stripping out and selling off of assets. Slater and the other takeover men were not the saviours of industry they pretended to be.
They like to pretend that they went in as some sort of consulting group and restructured industry. They didn't. They ripped it apart and sold off the assets and destroyed industry. They weren't interested in the regeneration of Britain. They were interested in making as much money as they could, by any means. Slater was beginning a tremendous process of change, which has ended with the destruction of large parts of British industry. Because the assets of industry were taken, and perhaps rightly so, but were taken and were used for other purposes.
The wave of takeovers created by the Labour government had little or no effect on productivity. The British economy stubbornly refused to grow. But the takeovers were having a hidden, revolutionary effect on the structure of power in Britain. Both Slater and now